Yeah.
Good.
Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and this week we're going to have an EIC 2024 debrief with Sebastian Rohr and Henk Marsman. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And before we dive in, I just want to remind everybody to follow Identirati Office Hours on LinkedIn for more great event notifications. And maybe before we dive into this, Sebastian, you were the first guest, and maybe you could give a quick overview. How did you find yourself as a guest summarizing EIC on this live stream?
That is a very good question. I wonder that myself sometimes. So yeah, I think the two of us have known us for quite a while. I've been a member of the Kuppinger Cole Analyst Group between 2007 and 2012, I think, and I strongly believe that we've met back then already. So we know each other for quite some time on and off. Me being concentrated on the European markets and not being able to go across the pond to visit any of the US American centered conferences. I was sort of stuck with EIC. And I do believe when we got back in contact a few months ago, it became obvious that you weren't able to attend, and I was sort of bickering about needing to go to see those two events in 2 weeks in a row, and that's going to be quite stressful. You came up with the idea, hey, won't you do a wrap up? You are attending those two. And yeah, here I am because I wasn't quick enough in walking away.
And Henk, so you've also been in at a number of EICs. How did you find yourself at EIC this year?
At EIC, what I've been doing there is also bringing some content out of research that I do, but I've been kind of part of the EIC crowd for years already. And with regards to Clue and Identirati, I think, Mike, we met like over a decade ago in the Netherlands. So you see this group of Identirati, that people who really stick around for longer than 6 years, they find each other, they meet up. There's something in this topic that catches us. And I find it this year at EIC also, again, interesting to see that the topics are slowly shifting, new topics are introduced, but it's still about this core of giving people access to something. And this identity, authorization, access challenge is really what brings us there.
Yeah, I remember. Well, Sebastian, I remember meeting at, I think it was EIC 2009 when we announced Glue. We announced in May, I believe it was May, around the mid-May, and then we subsequently incorporated Glue in June. So you were at that first one, and I think you had slightly less white hairs at the time.
Yeah, I must admit that the work in this kind of environment tends to be quite stressful. Fortunately, I do not lose hair. I just get more white and white. And I won't say that I'm moving from Sebastian the Gray to Sebastian the White, but maybe if you see me walking around with a staff or with a large wand, it happens to be that way. Yeah, it's been some time, and we've seen definitely a development in the topics where, let's say, back in that day, back in 15 years ago, it was more or less about what we now claim to be the basics. It was about basic federation. It was the times before we said SAML was dead. SAML was still in the start of its mainstream adoption. We only had like large enterprises and highly regulated enterprises that were dealing with core identity management, what now is identity governance and administration, IGA. We definitely see a shift, and that's a foundation of organization that needs to keep those basics in check, that's growing. We see the growing attendance both on Las Vegas and in Berlin. There are so many newbies there. There are so many people who visit their first conferences and discover that there are quite a decent bunch of people who've been there and done that, but they need orientation. And that is what I definitely like about those. Yes, you can turn to people like yourself and Henk and talk about the olden days when we first created our provisioning connectors here and there. And then you turn around and meet new people that just have adopted their first IGA solution and it's cloud only and stuff like that. So yeah, the amount of people talking about this definitely has grown, but also the array of topics that we're discussing now is really looking like a Cambric explosion. It's crazy when you see the diversity of topics that we've been covering in the last few weeks.
Right. And I jotted down a couple of topics that that are of interest to me selfishly. And I thought maybe what I do is ping pong some of these topics off of you and get some feedback on like consensus at EIC. The first one, maybe most topical, is last week we had a session on passkeys, or I'm sorry, this week. And I'm wondering, following up on that episode, Henk, maybe you could comment on did you get any new insights about passkeys, adoption challenges, or at EIC?
There were a couple of presentations on passkeys. And as Sebastian had said, I counted, there were 207 sessions, sometimes 6 tracks in parallel. So I didn't attend all. But what I took away on the passkeys topic is that the companies are actually working on it, implementing it now, getting it working. And there was one specific presentation by Martin Sanderen of IKEA, and he did highlight that they are not the holy grail. So the implementation of passkeys does add increased security to your cybersecurity posture as an organization, but it is not completely foolproof. It is not completely cyber secure to the max. So he said you should definitely go in that direction, but you'll still run into some other MFA tokens and some passwords and some users, and also like the more tricky social engineering part that is really getting to the companies. So the AI generated deep fakes of employees now engaging with support desks and trying to get credentials. Passkeys helps, but it's not the end yet. So that was interesting perspective. I thought of somebody who looked at this topic and placed it in the larger whole of a corporate environment.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's an early adoption corporate. Sebastian, any thoughts about passkeys, or should we?
Yeah,
should we go
absolutely.
To the
So I can only reinforce what Henk just said. Yes, there are some brave people who really support the topic and try to promote that inside their own organization and push those large scale adoptions forward. But the technology itself, the standards itself, are still under development. I've seen so many discussions going on in several social media platforms where people were raising concerns about the ability of passkeys to solve some of those. I am strongly convinced that passkeys are a very good step into that direction, but unfortunately, as every new and young technology based on standards that are still under construction, they do have some infancy problems, I will call. And I've been trying to adopt passkeys wherever I could, whenever I got one of those notifications. They are available on Android, they are available on my iPhone, they are available on my Windows platform. And I definitely suffer from those cross-platform problems that people are describing, but I do not feel like a guinea pig. I know that this is just the standard thing when you're trying to adopt a technology that is quite new. There are loads of very good websites out there that give guidance and provide insights to what are the known issues, what is being worked on, just expecting like it's a almost foolproof proven technology like SAML, which has been called dead for a good decade now. We're still seeing it. It's alive and kicking. We still have quite a bit of road to travel until we get to that point with passkeys. It's still hot off the press stuff, and it's far from being foolproof to be implemented.
Okay, well, let's go to the next topic. So John Phillips said 2024 is the year that decentralized identity became center stage. What were your takeaways on verifiable credentials and wallets? And Henk, I know we were talking about this before.
Yeah, what I still remember last year at EIC on Friday afternoon, one of the last sessions was on wallets and what Europe is coming up with in the EIDAS regulation of issuing wallets to citizens and allowing them to store their national identity and the digital legal identity in it. And that room was packed. So I think that was kind of the awakening and the surprise to EIC. So this year it was center stage. So the main podium was full of wallet-related, decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, self-sovereign identity. Those topics were really mainstream. And I think from my perspective, I see two things. That on the one hand, we see the technology and the standardization and basically the tech solutions coming in, allowing proper use of decentralized identity concepts, also in the corporate environments. And on the other hand, there was more than a full day dedicated to the EIDAS regulation, which is European regulation. It has been approved last February and published in April. And this regulation has as a big new element the digital identity wallet. And it orders every member state in Europe to have a digital identity wallet available for every citizen in their member state, free of charge. And you can use it to get your national identity in it, but also your driver's license and also, well, basically any other attribute that you want to store in your wallet. You can issue that attribute, you can share it. And the regulation also foresees that it's legally accepted within Europe. So we don't need physical passports. We don't need physical driver's license. Across Europe, it will be accepted. So that was kind of, we've seen that is technology enabled, but a lot of the conversations were on how will this play out. And the architectural reference framework is the detailing body under the legal regulation that describes how this should work. There are 4 large-scale pilots working on it, and also my take on that is that you see they are now kind of working their way through the happy flow with one stream and a smart digital literate user. There are a lot of conversations on what happens to other people in society, what happens when you fall out of the happy flow, or if you have half of your attributes in the wallet and you run into an online data request, will you do the other half in the form? How does that work in the customer journey? So lots of conversations also were on that topic. Basically looking at how this, I think it's a great idea that is captured in the EIDAS regulation, but how that will play out, because that's the other theme that I've been seeing coming up over the past couple of years at EIC. We did IAM at the enterprise, and it was an employee and an account and an authorization. Now we're going up to the way of legal identity, which is related to stuff like citizenship and legal representation. So the impact of our field of work is being massively changed and impacted.
Yeah. And there's a cultural change that needs to happen along with a technology change.
Mm-hmm.
And Sebastian, maybe we could pivot this conversation a little bit to enterprises. What does this mean for so sure, the government is about to at some point will issue citizens these new decentralized identities. As an enterprise, is that good for me? What can I use it for?
Yeah, that is a very good and especially very important conversation to be had, and a very important question to ask, because from working like 25 plus years in what we now call the identity and access management market, I definitely have found out one thing. Those are two-sided markets. It's totally nice if you come up with a great technology, with a great new thing that you think is just super duper valuable. But if there's no demand side for that, it's not going to happen. So we here in Germany, we've established a digital ID component of our identity cards. Everyone here in Germany is mandated to have one of those ID cards, and for quite some time now, they have had a digital component to it, but none of us uses it. Why we're not using it? Well, there are so few services to actually get it to be working with. There is no supply side to the enterprise or to the consumer where this actually makes sense. While I take a look at the Baltic states, I am an e-citizen of Estonia. I've been an e-citizen of Estonia for quite some time now, and I'm just blown away by the number of services that I'm able to use there, both in a person to government as well as a B2B and B2C environment. I can use that card for so many different applications. And we talked about that during EIC. There is €1 billion market for services that could be leveraged or could actually benefit from using such services. But you ask which, and as an enterprise, I just say, well, people management, onboarding in the typical IGA environment. If I use some sort of agency or service to look for a new job and I apply somewhere, I could actually supply that hiring organization with validated, verifiable attribute information about my personal records, about my employment records, if they are validated, and would make it much easier for that hiring organization to use those validated, verifiable attributes to fill their HR information system with them. Those would be making many of those hiring steps much easier. I would have great quality HR master data records, and that would definitely be something where the hiring process can be accelerated and the data quality for us, identity and access management experts on the IGA side, would be improved vastly.
Let me show a quick slide. AI is a topic of conversation at every conference in every industry. But I have to say, Patrick, who was a guest a couple of weeks back, I love this quote. The hottest new programming language is English. And as a proud English major, I can now claim that I actually did study computer science. So I was pretty excited to see this. And of course, topic is AI. Maybe some thoughts on, is AI, I have two questions about AI. Is AI maybe the ultimate policy authoring tool? And what else, what other tasks for enterprise identity people could AI really make easier, or maybe even make possible some jobs that were doing terrible? Henk, you want to take a stab at that one first?
Yeah, because there also was a lot of time spent on AI in the program of EIC, and I think we should know by now that AI killed all content-based verification. So you think you see me now, but could be anybody with an AI filter on his face. So that is a huge threat to organizations that make use of content-based verification. The other aspect was also that it kind of tied into the topic of societal, political, and ethical considerations on how do we use AI. AI ethically, AI justly and rightly. And it was an interesting stream that spun off there, because we kind of have this same ethical discussion around the wallets and how do we include every citizen and give everybody equal opportunity to join in this digital society. And there it also said, well, one of the risks there is that people will have this wallet, but they don't really know what they're doing. So they'll start sharing data everywhere. And now it's not their fake date of birth in a form. Now it's their actual date of birth, but they don't see the difference. So that is also an area of application for AI, where you can have a wallet and kind of an AI assistant that could support citizens saying, well, you're about to share data to a site, but it's a bit of a tricky site. Are you sure you want to do this? So those were kind of three angles on AI that I saw back in Berlin last week.
Sebastian, any thoughts about the topic of the day these days?
So I mainly followed those discussions that were around trying to use AI as a tool that it is for the grinding daily work of identity and access management, and that is, you asked specifically for something that we do bad or which really gets annoying: recertification. Yeah, a recertification of entitlements inside IGA is a tedious task, and that recertification fatigue is real. So what I really liked about those talks were making sure that only those recertifications are actually highlighted that really need the attention of the manager that is being tasked with that, and all the rest is sort of highlighted in green already. Yes, you can approve those because that is the standard, but this is an outlier. This one, they haven't used the access for quite some time. That is context information where all the login data, it's there. Nobody has time to analyze it. Nobody has time to write those filters to bring those different streams of information together. And that's where I think AI can actually help us quite a lot in making recertification easier, making the reshaping and the update of roles and entitlements to be requested and to be assigned easier. Taking away these tasks that really consume far too much time in our role-based access control models. That is stuff where I see lots of potential, because it's just data crunching.
Well, one of the things that I really like from Patrick's talk, which by the way is on YouTube, Jorg published on LinkedIn that it was one of his favorite talks. Also, Patrick's always great. He's an ex-scientist. He has a very analytical approach, and what I saw in that, and maybe this is because of my own bias, but I saw it was interesting that some of these low-code and DSL tools that have come about, while people might say, oh, I don't want to do them anymore, they're actually great for AI because they give AI. So take an example like CEDAR policies. Well, you can tell CEDAR to the AI to learn CEDAR and give me CEDAR syntax policies. So it makes me wonder if the ultimate policy authoring tool is maybe my AI. It's like, yeah, writing those policies is really hard. So anyway, any thoughts on that? Interaction of AI and tooling. Henk, you want to take a stab at that?
I see two lines there. I think AI can be really useful in the interaction with tooling, because it has the power not only to automate but also to analyze. I just personally find that the eye of intelligence is still a bit misplaced in AI. So, and also at EIC, there were a couple of presentations that showed that, for example, AI and large language models gravitate towards the average. So if you kind of rerun things through the model and feed it again, they will come up with average. So they can do really good papers, but it's not spicy, not tasty, not excellent. It's on average, and kind of good editors can pick those papers out, and they know. And it's so that is the area where I think we can use it on tooling, but you still need the human on top of it, and you still need to have some kind of understanding of what the AI is doing. Because if you let it run wild, we've seen too many cases of where it really goes wild, and that's not where we want to go with authorization management or policy
with the policies that do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good pivot into policies. There's been sort of a renaissance of authorization companies solving authorization in different ways. A lot of them come to EIC. Sebastian, what were your takeaways about authorization and the evolution of these tools?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways for some of the attendees that did talks on authorization was exactly the evil twin of our identity beer, the authority beer, which my partner Roland Baum came up with, and that actually was a nice thing. No, all kidding aside, seeing the uptake is definitely a reflection of what's going on in the industry as a whole. There are really a lot of new organizations or startups that have different approaches to doing fine granular authorization. Is it graph based? Is it AWS Cedar based? Is it OPA, Rego? There are several languages coming up. There are several models coming up, and they are all competing right now. And I would call that a very, very nice and bustling, lively community where there is really, really loads of good conversations. I know that some of the organizations have been around for quite a longer time, with Exacaml and Axiomatics sort of doing a rebound now with David Brossard having the primary role of torch barrier there. And it's so fun to see those lively discussions between people that have completely different approaches, but working very, very closely together for the better of us all, making sure that this is interoperable, that we do not need to learn 5 different languages to express our policies. Because there I do see the benefit of AI. If we're watching it, if we understand how to write good policies in Rego, good policies in Cedar, or build good graphs that show how the relationships should be implemented, we still need that quality assurance aspect before we can hand it over to AI. But right now, it's the people, it's the authority community, which has really, really grown since we first coined that term during Identiverse last year in Las Vegas. And it's just great to see so many bright minds come together and tackle that set of problems with completely different points of view and visions. I just love it.
So David Brossard's going to start authority office hours, I hope, soon.
Maybe, just maybe, yes.
Henk, what were your thought takeaways on authorization? Any progress at EIC?
I must say I didn't spend a lot of time on the authorization topic at EIC, because I was more interested in the wallet. But what I did see was the interesting mix of companies that attend, either sponsors or interested sponsors, where I've seen the large ones, but also a lot of new ones, even far from Berlin, outside of Europe. A lot of companies that kind of start up in this space. And I think that might also be connected to where we 10, 15 years ago had the Oracle, CA, IBM type of stacks that had deep investments into the provisioning connectors and the tech and the coding. Now we see, I think, a lot of bright minds with a good idea, and they just start building it in the cloud environment on top of a complete available stack. And that's what I found interesting. Yeah.
I noticed Cerbos was
Mhm.
there for the first time, I believe, and we had Amre Baran was a guest early on a couple of months back, and they have a really interesting platform, and you can watch that live stream. Henk, maybe we'll just pivot to any notable IAG innovations. So did you see any, like, there's I always say nothing, there's not a lot happens in governance. We've been doing a lot of the same things for a lot of years,
Mhm.
maybe excluding AI, or maybe that's not fair. Was there anything in the governance that you saw that was like, okay, this is new this year?
Not that much in specific products for as far as I've seen. What I did see is that out of the typical IGA domain, where we were already thinking about attributes-based access, kind of the from federated identity to self-sovereign identity. I think this is an area that is now really appearing, where I see a lot of people trying to figure out what they want to do. So if a user has an attribute that he or she can share, how can you use it in the corporate context? So I'm not issuing you an employee badge anymore. If you have your passport in your wallet and you can give that to me in a zero knowledge proof type of way, then why should I then again issue you an employee ID? I just want to give you an attribute that you're a member of my organization.
Yeah.
And I think it's not there in the product stack yet, but I think in 1 or 2 years, we'll probably see IGA products that are much more data oriented and credential oriented, figuring out how to pass along credentials and not just issuing it, but also accepting it based on technology and standards like verifiable credentials. With solutions, as in Europe, with the citizen that can bring a wallet with verifiable credentials from the government, and also I think in the US domain, where Google and Apple are playing with the mobile driver's license, which I think in a couple of states is like the legal identification method you can use. I think this is getting into the mix for the kind of next level IGA.
Interesting. So people are bringing their own claims and credentials. Sebastian, do you notice any new trends in
Yeah.
IAG?
So is it okay to name companies here?
Of
We
course,
already
yeah,
named a few. So
yeah.
yeah, what I really liked is one of the really unliked stepchildren of IGA are the disconnected apps. Those apps where there is just no possibility to do a direct provisioning to. And a new contender, at least for me on my radar, was Aquera. They did a great presentation on how to manage disconnected applications and bring them into the managed set of applications with their technology. That was one of the vendors where I actually went and said, okay, I want a deeper tech discussion. I want to understand how you're doing that. I want to understand how my customers that I do IGA for can benefit from that approach. And I'm really looking forward for that
Do you mean
technological deep dive.
like a detachable work group that maybe goes and works on its own for a while, or is it just a person that's maybe detaching?
No. It's about well, in large scale organizations where there is a large number of
Air gaps.
historically grown small applications that just don't have an ODBC, JDBC context. They don't have SCIM, SPML capability, and you still need to somehow manage access to those applications. And you are doing that bloody CSV export import thingy,
Right,
which is
right.
not really good. They had a new idea around bringing those into a state where they are much better governed. I can't comment anymore because I just need to. I thought I need to take a look at that. Maybe I'll come back next year and say, Joe, that was boring. But hey, I'm having high hopes. But let me
Well,
circle back to
put that in the show
what
notes, actually, after.
yeah,
Yeah, just add
exactly.
a link so we can all check it out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, Yeah, I really wanted to pick up on that whole Google and Apple thing and the driver's licenses, because one of the discussions was that we as Europeans should actually work toward a situation where it is not allowed that our driver's licenses and our EIDs could be imported to the stacks of the native Apple and native Google Wallet, because it would deteriorate the importance of the digital sovereignty projects on the wallet side in the EU. So saying, okay, those are state issued credentials, no can do. These need to be implemented and integrated to state verified and state validated wallets that have a certain level of assurance aligned to it. That I found to be very, very important. And I'm looking forward to see how that develops.
Right. I would say a level of protection is probably more the concern. Is if I issue a credential to this wallet, does the wallet have the protection to make sure? Because if it leaks and somebody else can present it, then you've just like destroyed the whole thing. So
I would say it depends. We Europeans have a strictly different approach to that, because we see the dominance of US American corporations ruling or influencing how we live our lives already taken over. And the European Union is really, really, really trying to foster that, let's say, disconnect, that approach that we are more in control of what we do on this side of the pond. Yes, of course, we will need an Android phone. Yes, of course, we will need an Apple phone to walk around and show that. But does it really have to reside on that phone? Can't we put it somewhere else? Can't we just use the phone as sort of the user interface that shows it? There's been lots of good discussions going on about that.
I think that's the existential question, that we're changing the trust model between IDP and SP into holder, verifier, what's the other one? Issuer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, Henk, any thoughts on that trust model change?
Yeah, definitely. Because one of the main reasons for the EU to move in this direction is that they've seen cases where public opinion has been influenced by large corporations based on just knowing who the users are, being able to track them, to trace them, and that's of course also flowing from me having multiple accounts at data stores, at organizations that share and resell and combine and duplicate that data. That trust model is really moving over to like the SSI model, as Chris Allen blogged on years ago. Now we give everything to the user, and the user decides where this will be shared. That also means something for the liability of organizations, where they could previously say, Henk has been at the front door and I got his data out of a few verified databases at other organizations, for example. Now Henk is giving me all the data. So in the happy flow, that's okay. But this trust model obviously specifically needs to address what if things go wrong. So if I was frauded by Henk and it turns out it's not Henk, so where do I sue? Where do I complain? How does that work? So in this trust model, there will be more emphasis on the user with the data, and hence also the European Union says, and of course, anybody can participate in our big wallet game, but there are a few strict requirements. For example, one of them is that if you want to get certified as a wallet under this scheme, you need to be open source. That is going to be a big hurdle for commercial companies. And of course, the European Union, I think, has a bit the stand like, if you have nothing to hide, you can be open source. So, and of course, the other side will have other arguments definitely to not be open source. So it's also kind of a battle of the values going on a global scale to figure out how in this new data world are we going to build this trust model, and where do we gravitate towards?
Well, we have a couple minutes left. I'm going to pivot to the last topic, and then we'll go to final thoughts. But maybe we can quickly cover one more topic. Any cool biometric or EKYC like vendors or products or innovations that you saw?
I can describe something, but I was told not to be too specific. So one of our fellow Identorati switched employers most recently, and I was only able to catch up with him on the last day in Las Vegas, and then again quite briefly in Berlin. That was a really interesting approach where biometric patterns were actually encoded in a way that a third person could use it to verify that it's actually the person that is coming to their doorstep, be it a repairman or something like that. I found that to be really interesting, and I'm still chewing on where to bring that technology to its best use. So that was definitely one of the really important ones. And then there are definitely others that try to improve the whole KYC experience with making that verification much easier, and also bringing more trust to the relationships between customers and their vendors. But yeah, apologies. I was told not to talk about that too much.
Something maybe in the behavioral biometrics area. Hank, any cool advances? I just love the biometric advances we're seeing.
Not any real cool technological advances that I've seen, but they must have been there, like with vein recognition and stuff like this. What I did see was at the beginning of a conversation on how is biometrics being used in the law enforcement domain, and what is the difference between a unique identification and a verified identification, and kind of how the biometrics opens up new possibilities, and then how that's legally phrased to see out of the enterprise into the state level domain, how that will be used. I think it's a whole different topic also for EIC, maybe a bit a bridge too far, so to speak. But to me, that gave me the insight that we are kind of connecting the concepts that we have been doing for decades in corporations, now also on a national level, and those people are also coming into EIC and sharing that. So that exchange and that cooperation is really key to make sure that if we use biometrics, that we use them properly, store them properly, protect them properly. Because I always say you can reset a passport, but I have only 10 resets here on my fingerprints, and then I'm through with resetting my fingerprint. So it has a different impact.
Cool. Well, I just want to remind everybody to please follow Identorati Office Hours on LinkedIn. We're trying to get to 1,000 follows. And maybe last thoughts. I'll start with you, Hank.
For me, my takeaway from EIC was really that our professional domain is exploding into areas that we didn't foresee like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So in that sense, it's super exciting, but it's also absolutely a stretch to cover it all. I've also seen that at EIC, and I think that will be the challenge to get people in our space that are able to explain it in a simple way so that we can see the entire jigsaw puzzle without having to spend weeks to understand the details of every little piece of the puzzle.
So let's see if I can get this one right. Sebastian, last thoughts?
Yeah, I can only chime into what Hank just said. When I chose to specialize in identity management, when I came from information security, IT security, I thought, oh well, this is my niche. And suddenly I feel that we are in a Cambric explosion, and there is so much going on in the space. In the last 10 years, it was hard to keep up with the developments in the IGA space, in the access management, in the provisioning space, and everything that was going on with OAuth and stuff. And suddenly we have passkeys, suddenly we have wallets, suddenly we have fine-grained authorization. I really have the feeling that for the remaining 1.5 decades that I might have in that industry, I again need to specialize and choose some topics to follow on, because being the identity management generalist that I claim to be in the last decade, I do not think that this is feasible for the next decade anymore. You really need to pick and choose now to stick to the topics that you think are going to be important for your career.
Awesome. Well, I hope next year I can join you guys. And it sounds like it was a great event as usual. And I see lots of comments, so we can continue this conversation on the LinkedIn Identity Office Hours LinkedIn page. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. I'm trying to get the videos right here. Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you all next time. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.